red flags, yellow flags, or just a shift. Um, I always look for like fun ways of naming these classes to make you go, "What in the world are we talking about tonight?" Um, and what I really want to look at this evening is how we recognize problematic behavior. It's with our spouses and with our kids, and what do we do about it? A lot of times we discover is you see this a lot. Something happens, somebody does something, and then like, man, we just couldn't imagine this happening to this family, marriage, kid, person, whatever. And then as you look back, you're like, oh yeah, I did kind of see that. Oh, you can see that sign. You can see the signs as you look back, but oftentimes in the midst of it, um, we kind of just think change happens. But things don't just change. Things change, and they change for a reason. They can be good reasons, they can be bad reasons, they can be healthy reasons, they can be selfish reasons. And so along the way, when we recognize something that changes in the life of someone we love, how do we not just let that go away without being confronted and ask the question, what's going on? And is there something that we need to do about it? Because sometimes they really are just changes that need to be made because we're growing, we're maturing, or we recognize something needs to be different or better. Other times there are behaviors that will change that should cause us to go, this needs to be addressed. And it needs to be addressed quickly. So as we get started here, I want you to think. Man, I'm going to get off this slide fast. It's going to drive me crazy looking at that wrongly aligned box. What is a hobby that you have? Gardening. Oh, gardening.
Playing bingo.
Bingo. By yourself?
No.
Oh, no, with a group, right? Yeah. Yeah. You got to do that in the community, right? It's just not as fun if you're playing bingo solo. No. But you win all the time. What else? Hobby? Fishing. Hunting. Reading, camping, shopping. I love that hobby. What do you enjoy about your hobbies? Solitude, quiet, friends, community. I've developed a hobby of disc golf. Aaron got me into disc golf when we were in school together back in 2000, whenever I went back to school. Heather would know the date. 2009. And I thought it was the goofiest thing in the world, disc golf. Still kind of is the goofiest thing in the world, but it's fun. And I get outside, get some exercise. I can win, and if you can make it competitive, I am in. I will compete at just about anything. There's a whole community around it that's really cool. I get to meet some people that I would never cross paths with otherwise. I really used to like golf, but golf would take up 3/4 of a day. By the time you get to the course, warm up, you play a 4 or 5 hour round, and you get back home. It's expensive too. And once you buy the discs, most disc golf courses are free, which that's a plus. We have all kinds of reasons that we enjoy the hobbies that we have. And we'll talk about why that question is important, because sometimes things change around that. As we look at Scripture, Ecclesiastes 4:12 should be pretty familiar for most of you in this room. Where do we see Ecclesiastes 4:12 frequently in this church? Do I? Better together, yeah. We were making the Better Together t-shirts, which, by the way, if you don't have a Better Together t-shirt, got a bunch that you can have one. I had, we had this deal, and I'd seen it was kind of cool. I had this little rope around their Better Together thing, and I was making a logo that we could put on a shirt. And I always wondered, like why is this random rope wrapped around the Better Together thing? And so I sent Adam and Megan the deal, and he said, "Hey, I think it looks really great, but could we put our theme scripture down there, Ecclesiastes 4:12?" I was like, "Oh yeah, of course we can." And I meant to have it in there anyway, so I flipped over to Ecclesiastes 4:12. If someone overpowers one person, two can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. And then my brilliant mind was like, "Oh, that's a cord of 3 strands." Of course it is. Why wouldn't it be? It's important for us to hold each other accountable, for our lives to be woven together in such a way. In Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, one person sharpens another. And that is the importance and the foundation from which we're going to talk about. How do we identify things when things are coming up? Because it's important for us. It's important in your marriages. It's important in your relationships with your children, in any relationship that's of value to you. And sometimes you're going to see this in friends and in other relationships before you see it in your own. Bib's counting from the window. It kind of freaked me out over there. I looked up and I saw, "Hey, Bib." Like, so, what is going on? Man. One of the things that we hope our small groups grow into is this kind of camaraderie that recognizes things, and we hope our small group leaders are able to identify some of these kind of behaviors that, hey, something's changed in the lives of these people. Families used to come one way. Husband and wife used to come, and they would always sit together, but now they kind of sitting apart. They interacted one way, and now they're interacting differently, or now one's coming and the other one's not. And just recognizing patterns before they get so far down the road that they're almost irreparable. We have constant check-ins with our kids, with our youth group. They have Sherpas, they've got events, they've got youth, they've got their families, they've got other activities, they've got the girls have a deal now and the guys have a deal, which Clint's hitting a home run with that Ironworks. Every time they come back from one of those, they can't stop talking about all the fun they had doing man outdoor things. And they're doing cool stuff with the college kids too. And we want these small groups to be a place where we're able to really sharpen one another, but also recognize when something changes and ask the question, "Hey, everything good? Notice something a little different." But frequently there would be someone in our lives, Heather's in my life. One person just comes to mind that always just kind of jumps out. And this lady was always kind of dressed kind of homely, kind of heavier, had needed some dental work, never had her hair done. And all of a sudden she goes and has gastric bypass surgery. She lost 75 pounds. She got her hair done. She got her teeth fixed. Started going to the gym. And I told Heather, I said, she's about to get a divorce. And 2 months later, she was divorced. And I think like 6 months later, she was remarried. Because, we had known that our kids had all gone to school together. And so they'd grown up all the same. And then all of a sudden, a complete life shift. What has caused that kind of a dramatic change? Now, could it be she just wanted to get healthy? Could be. But oftentimes there is something driving a radical change like that. So here's what I want us to really understand. Change in life is never random. Why do we change? Why do you change? Maybe that.
Is that a question for us to answer? Or are we just thinking?
Well, it's either a question for me to answer or we can sit in silence for a little bit. It's fine. Why do you change?
Maturity.
maturity. Sometimes it's just a natural part of growing up and maturing.
Or immaturity.
Sometimes it's immaturity. Sometimes we're changing because we're regressing. Why do we regress? Why do we get less mature sometimes, even as we get older?
Act different.
Yeah. So, events that transpire in your life, sometimes you can look, and a lot of people will say, this happened. I was trying to do the right thing, and doing the right thing did me no good. So for a little bit, I'm regressing back. It's a way of acting out. Even as adults, sometimes we act out. Sometimes it's just a natural instinct of self-protection is to kind of draw back into some of those things. But a reaction from events in life. Maybe you're changing because you want to be healthier. Any of you change because you meet friends that have different expectations of life? Does that make you want to change the way you live? It does me. If I enjoy going to the gym and working out, I'm really boring by myself. I'm not a gym bro. Like, you're not going to find me in the gym. But if I got 3 or 4 guys that are like, hey man, you want to go work out? I'm like, yeah, I'm in. Because they're getting a little healthier. We're all getting a little healthier together. We're holding each other accountable. There's a little bit of community, a little bit of camaraderie there. And that's a lot better than me just going slamming iron with no one to impress. Because when Heather and I go to the gym together, she doesn't sling iron with me. She wants to go to the treadmill or the stair stepper or the rowing machine. Or, oh yeah, she loves step class. I go to step class and all the ladies go. I will tell you, a friend of mine, a guy friend of mine, we were at the Transformation Gym in Edmond, Oklahoma, and he said, I want you to come to this class with me. I'm like, bro, we don't do classes. And he says, yeah, I think it was called Core, or was it Body Pump there? I think it was Body Pump. I'm like, that doesn't sound like it sounds like a kind of a fruity class. And he goes, no, it's aerobic weightlifting. I'm like, that's not helping, Travis. Like, he goes, it's at 5:30 in the morning. I'm like, you're not getting any better. I said, but I'll go. And he said, if you can make it through without throwing up, I'll buy your lunch. I didn't make it through. It was the hardest, most intense workout. And here's the thing. The girl that was leading class, she was skinny, really skinny. And I looked up there and I saw what weight she was putting on her bar. And I was like, I can double that. I could not double that. It was so hard. Like, we got like 30 minutes in and I'm like, dude, I'm about to throw up. He goes, yep, me too. But we wanted that community. When you get with people that have a different desire, sometimes we change with the people that we are around. We change because we're growing. We change because of things that are going on in our lives. We change because of the people that we are around. Particularly what I want to focus on this evening is, how do we know when something's going on in the lives of our children or our spouse, if they're just growing, or if they're just developing healthier habits, or if there really is something that's going on in their life that's causing a change. Because sometimes that change is not healthy and sometimes it's not good. But change always comes as a result. It's either moving from something or it's moving to something. It doesn't just happen. When it comes to confronting these things, our typical response is, I want answers. Our kids are starting to hang around with a crowd of friends that we don't really like, that we think are a bad influence on them. They start making bad grades. Our husband or our wife starts coming home from work and they're not as helpful as they once were. Or maybe they're a little more short-tempered than they once were. Maybe they start cracking jokes that we don't find appropriate. Or maybe they just start picking up bad habits. Maybe we see that our kids are not dressing the way they once did. They're not taking care of themselves. Maybe our husband or wife isn't taking care of themselves. And we want to know. I want to know why. I want to know, hey, how come you haven't turned in any of your homework? How come your grades are sorry? How come you're doing this? How come you're doing this? How come you're doing this? And we come almost in an interrogatory way. We come as an interrogation. I don't know what the right word is there. I like interrogatory, though. If that's not a word, it needs to be a word. It's a word? Yes. See, I didn't make up words. But what we don't do is we don't really seek understanding. And so what I want to encourage us to do when we recognize something is I want to understand what's going on. And it's not about getting to the bottom of something. It's about understanding more about who the person is and what's going on in their life. Not about the behavior, but about what the motivation is. Does that make sense? Understanding is more important than answers. And that's just a posture. It really is just ultimately we're getting to the same end, but the posture can really offer an environment for openness and conversation, while the other one can be a place where we just kind of shut down because we feel like we're being interrogated. And I'm going to tell you, I don't get interrogated well. Heather can ask me one question 2 different ways. One, I will respond with kindness and sensitivity, and the other, I will respond with defensiveness and who do you think you are asking me that question? And the question can be exactly the same, just with a different posture and a different tone. If I leave a cereal bowl on the table, she can say, "What's this doing here?" Or she can pick it up and she can say, "Are you finished?" I'm going to respond the same way with the same words with both. If she says, "What's this doing here?" I'm going to be like, "Hey, man, I was getting it. Man, just here, give it to me. I was getting it." And I'm going to go rinse it and put it in the dishwasher, which is probably what I was doing and just got distracted along the way and set it down, right? Or if she picks it up and says, "Hey, are you finished?" I'm going to say, "Oh, yes, I was. I'm sorry. I was headed to the dishwasher. Let me grab that. And here, let me have yours too, because now I feel bad." It's a funny little thing, right? But posture changes everything. Tone changes everything. And seeking understanding is more important than trying to drive out answers, because the answers are going to come when we seek to understand more. And I think for me, when I read about what it is to be a cord of 3 strands and how it's woven together, it's this desire for just an intense, intimate knowledge of our spouse and our children. This is from one of my classes this past semester in family therapy. One of my professors used this, and it's not original to him, but he uses it a lot. He says, "Everything makes sense in context." He said, if you don't understand, or if it makes no sense to you, then you need more context. The way your husband acts, the way your wife acts, the way your children act makes sense. Sometimes you look and you go, "No way that makes sense." And if that's it, then you need to ask more questions. He told a story that I'm going to share to you because it's pretty powerful. He was working in a juvenile detention facility. And there was a boy that they were counseling who was eating his feces. And he had been diagnosed with all sorts of mental issues and disorders. He was 3 or 4 times diagnosed for something in the DSM-5. And they were talking to him. And he said, this really came to my mind. He goes, this mentor of mine that told me, if it doesn't make sense, you don't have enough context. And so we just started asking him questions. How does it make sense that a teenage boy would eat poop? As it turns out, he had been in the juvenile system for 7 or 8 years. And early on, he was raped by the boys in his facility multiple times. And then one time he went to the bathroom and he didn't wipe. And he found out that those boys came to rape him again, and they were disgusted by him and they left him alone. And then he learned that the more he smelled like poop, the more they left him alone. And so the way he protected himself led to this behavior. He didn't have an issue with the DSM-5. He had an issue with being safe and secure, and he needed someone to take him. You can be safe and you can be secure, and you don't have to go to that extreme to do it. And we're here to protect you, and we're here to show you. Your kids are going to do things that make no sense to you. Your husbands and your wives are going to do things that make no sense to you. The question is, do we have the ability to seek understanding before we assume? Because if I don't understand, then I start making assumptions about the people that are doing something that I don't understand. I don't understand why you did that, so I'm going to put my motivation in your body. When the truth is, there may be something going on. We may have kids that are being bullied. We may have kids that are being talked to. They may be bullied by another student. They may be being bullied by another teacher. We assign motive unless we seek to understand it. And then once we understand it, then we know how to move forward with it. Any thoughts on any of those three things before we go on to kind of what we do? Any questions?
I'd like for that to be my reflex instead of just being annoyed or judging somebody. Just ask more questions. That sounds like a good idea. Sounds wise.
It does sound wise, doesn't it?
So many times I'm embarrassed by my original stance, my original judgment. And just in a few minutes, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm full.
Mm-hmm.
If I'd have just asked more questions, I could have saved myself.
And taking that one extra step, I mean, because our instinct is, I'm going to get mad, I'm going to get angry, I'm going to get upset, I'm going to get frustrated, I'm going to get sad. Because we've assigned those things, just a couple of extra steps to just start asking questions. And then the answer to that question is going to lead you to another question. And then the answer to that question might lead you to another question. So just I hope that someday that becomes my conditioned response. It's just instinctively I'm going to ask questions. It's hard even in counselor mode to ask questions and sit back and just be quiet. And you know what one of the most uncomfortable things in the world is? Silence. Say if you sit in silence long enough, someone will eventually break it. I don't know, because I'm always the one that breaks it because it's uncomfortable. Hey, I think we should ask questions often. Not just in response to what's going on. How often do you ask questions in your house? No, you should keep asking questions. And if your kids don't answer, wait for an answer. Even if that means that we sit here on the couch in silence. At first it might be we didn't really, we would do it around the dinner table a lot. That was the time where we would really talk. And, Heather had a series of questions. What was your favorite part of the day? What was one thing you did well and one thing that you could have done better? We would do those. But there was like also just constant check-ins. Um, Now, Jody, our daughter, was the question asker. Man, she asked some tough questions. Boys would be like sacked out asleep in the. I remember I had an F-150. It was an extended cab, but it was the short extended cab, so the back seat was really small. But when we'd go camping, all three of the kids would be back there, and the boys were out, and then all of a sudden Jody's head pops over the seat. She's like, "Hey." He's like, "So I was thinking." It's like, this is going to be trouble if it starts with "I was thinking." But she would ask questions. But ask questions often, and like really and truly, just don't accept patent answers. And that's going to be hard, like at first. It really is, because it's a culture that you have to create. And we talked about at the Valentine's banquet is you can't create culture. Culture is an extension of who you are. And so what you have to develop is this point of character and expectation. They're going to hate it. I mean, especially kids, they're going to hate it. Husbands and wives are going to hate it too, because we just don't like to answer questions often. Like, how often do you get asked questions? Probably not enough. There are question games that you can play. There is, like, if you are curious, on the Faith and Family webpage of the church website, there are links there for the 20 questions game, because we do have some newlyweds here, James and Linda. Y'all just been married a few years. You still learn things about each other. You can. But you know why? Because if James is the same man that Linda married 50, how many? 55 years ago, that is not the same man that she married. And Linda's not the same woman. I'm not telling anybody anything they didn't know, James. I think I just got called into the elder's office tomorrow. But, no, because we like, if I assume that Heather is the same person that I married and just keep treating her like she's the same person that I married, we're not going to be very good. Because when I first married Heather, she loved muffins and donuts. She can't eat those things anymore. She loved pizza. And I realize sometimes how long it's been since she's had good bread, because she'll have something gluten-free and she'll go, "Ooh, babe, this is good. You want to try some?" And I'll try a bite and I'm like, "Oh, baby. I forgot how long it's been since you've had bread. Like, this is not good. But I appreciate that you love it, and I will keep buying it for you. I just won't eat it." We're not the same. We're not the same. And so we have to keep learning and asking questions the way that we learn about one another. Yeah, Doug. I think that's a really good point. And something that's very worth. There's a lot of times your wives, men in here, your wives will ask you the questions that they want to be asked. And sometimes we struggle with being observant, because we kind of think, hey, we just kind of go along to get along, and we don't want to rock the boat. And as long as everybody's happy and everybody's clothed and nobody's bleeding, then we've kind of done our job. And we stop exploring to know each other. So with your kids, like, just at first you can accept 1 or 2 word answers. But learn to teach them how to grow and learn through that, because that's how you learn. You want to know what's going on at school. Who are your friends? And it's not just about, it's not about results. I'm not asking you questions because I'm seeking something. I'm really asking you questions because I really just want to know. And that can be hard. And what you'll find is it's pretty easy when they're toddlers. It gets a little harder when they get older, and then it gets easier again. And then they turn into teenagers, and then they kind of lock up like bricks, right? And then over time, they start opening up again, especially as you keep providing those avenues for them to do so and expectations. But you're creating a culture in your home of openness and asking those questions. Yeah, Marshall. And that's the thing about asking questions. Asking questions does a couple of things. Number one, it builds trust. Because if I'm asking you questions every day, that when there is something that I recognize that we want to go into deeper, I've already built the trust that this is not a point of manipulation. This is a part of what we do. We touch base every day. And we talk about not just stuff that's going on, but we talk about what's going on with you. We talk about how are you feeling? All the stuff kind of comes around. So when we do have something we want to address, we've already built up the trust. The other thing is your kids will backfill the silence. Like if we are not giving them that attention and that place of asking those questions, they're going to come back and they're going to assume if my dad is absent, I've done something wrong. If my mom isn't really interested in me, I've done something wrong. If something is wrong in the house and we haven't given them the avenue to do it, our kids will backfill it with there's something wrong with me. And so we are going to actively and proactively make sure that there is a space for that, for them to be heard, for them to be expressed, and for that to go. However that rolls. Yeah, Seth. Well, and because the truth is, I mean, kids are going to push against boundaries because they want to know, is this a firm boundary? Am I safe here? Because if I push against a boundary and it moves, I'm like, what can I trust? Because that was supposed to be firm, and then I pressed on it, and now it's not firm. And sometimes we want to just kind of move kind of with it, and we're not gonna move too far. We're gonna move a little bit, be a little flexible, and we think that we're being kind of good, flexible parents, when in reality, what they need something sturdy and firm that they can press against and lean against and know that it's not going to budge. Because they know if that boundary is not going to budge, then the person that said it's not going to budge. And sometimes that can turn into a knockdown, drag out war of wills, depending on your child. Because some children are more strong-willed than others. Some press a little bit and it doesn't move, like, all right, I'm good. Others press and they go, how hard can I press? Can I press a little firmer? Can I beat against it? Can I bring a backhoe or a tractor or some way? How can I knock this wall down? How firm is this? Dylan was one of ours that just he's reserved and he's quiet, and he answers texts with one word. Okay, yes, or a thumbs up. Jody and Heather will talk, 2.5 hours the other day? 2.5 hours they talked on the phone the other day. They will just like best friends. We do talk that long with Dustin because that means the grandkids are on FaceTime. And so we definitely talk as long as they will stay on there. Dustin had a phone and we would send him a text and he wouldn't answer back. And then he finally was like, look, we got you a cell phone. How come you never answered when we text you? And he had those little Pantech phones that had the little bitty keypad on it. And he said, you tried texting me on this little bitty keyboard with my hammer thumbs. I remember him saying that. He was 13 years old. He goes, these hammer thumbs hit 4 keys at once. I'm not texting you back on this thing. I remember when Dylan went to college, he'd lost that connection a little bit with his mom. And I called him and I was like, hey, call your mother. Like she doesn't she just wants to know that her baby's okay. She wants to know about your day. She cares that you're making bad grades or making good grades or doing things or outside, but really more than anything, she just wants to know that her baby's okay. So call your mom. And I told him, I said, I want you to know something. When any of you 3 call, her world stops. It doesn't matter when or where we are. We stop, everything shuts down. She goes out there and she takes the phone call. And she's on the phone until you say bye. We were somewhere that we were getting ready to go. Our movie was about to start. I didn't even get my shopping done because we were going to have a little shopping date and go to a movie. Dustin calls. And so we're sitting in the Target parking lot on FaceTime with Dustin and Sophia and Athena. And it finally got to a point where I said, Dustin had said, hey, we need to go. It's about time for us to go. We're going to brunch. And he said it like 3 times. And I told him, I finally said, Dustin, you're going to have to hang up because your mom is not saying bye until you say, I love you, Mom, bye. I said, and I got to eat and our movie starts in 25 minutes. So I love you, bye. So that connection is important. And it doesn't come right away, and it is so hard, but you have to build from something and start putting that in as a part of your culture. Sometimes your kids are not going to be responsive. And even still today, we don't have long conversations there. It's short, it's brief, it's often one word answers. Let's get through these, and we'll demand honesty. And if you're going to demand honesty from your children or your spouse, you have to model honesty. If you're going to set boundaries for your kids, you need to show them that those boundaries are important for you as well. I expect your life to be an open book, and I'm going to let you know that as long as it is appropriate, my life is an open book to you as well. And also, there is nothing that we can't talk about in our home. I don't care what you've been, what you've done. There is nothing off the table when it comes to those things. We're going to be open. We're going to be honest. In our jobs, we're always seeking how we can learn more about what it is that we do. And we have to be continuously educating ourselves on who our people are. Who our people are around, who our kids are around, what's going on, so that when something changes, we know, is this something that we need to address? And we can do it, and we can address it early. And finally, a lot of times we make changes because we're trying to get away from something. And it's one of my favorite questions to ask myself and other people is this: are you running from something, or are you running to something? You're getting ready to make a change in your life, a change in a job, a change in a relationship, a change. You're going to quit a team, drop a class, you're dropping a friend, or you're dropping a relationship or something. If you're running from something, it's going to find you. So let's set up a culture where we are constantly running to something. We're going to set goals. We're going to set things that we're after, and we're going to make decisions that are constantly in pursuit of what we want to be as in our marriages and our families, just like we do in our careers. Because if we're running from something, we're never going to get away. So run to something. Any thoughts before I hear unmanned kids running down the hallway? Let's pray. God, again, we thank you for the day and for the time that we've been given. We thank you for your love and for your faithfulness. And I pray, God, that as we go about our lives this week, that we would strive to live lives that are modeled around your love, around your sacrifice, and around your faithfulness. That we would be a strong cord of 3 strands that's wound tightly around your will and your way, and that we would strive to sharpen one another, that we would be invested in the lives of our friends and our family, and that we would have the courage to ask questions, even hard questions, as we hold one another accountable, as we all have promised to live in your will. We thank you for the unity we have in the blood of Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen.